Check, check. Test.
Seen that on a Sunday, so I just have to assume that these were people who were leaving the festival and so decided to get a little bite to eat maybe or some coffee. And so I know Gary Gilligan and his team work very hard every year to bring folks, the farmers from around our area, not obviously really in Auburn directly, but such a huge economic driver this year and every year. So kudos to the Mandarin Festival staff.
Yes, and I'll say that on Sunday it was equally as busy because of course, we ran into each other on Saturday, and it was just amazing the number of people there. People really seemed to have been enjoying themselves. Reese was doing great service there with Old Town Pizza. Had a chance to talk to him. So love the Mountain Mandarin Festival and looking forward to next year. I know he sent out a note, and it's so we already got it on my calendar. But kudos to Gary and his crew. And to all of our businesses. We had a lot of Auburn businesses out there, and it was great to see them as well. So very good.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, I'll go ahead and open up public comment at this time. Yep. Hi, Sally. How are you?
I've been keeping up with my community project, trying to keep Auburn beautiful. And so many smokers don't give a crap. Excuse my plumbing terminology. I'm a plumber's daughter. And I can't believe the smokers that have the LUIIDASS syndrome. Lazy, uncaring, inconsiderate, irresponsible, idiotic, stupid, dumbass smokers. Anyway, I am now 2,127,323. Thanks to all the wonderful smokers out there. Oh, did I say wonderful? I meant the ST word. Stupid smokers. And so many people appreciate what I'm doing. And when parents have their kids with them, I tell the kids don't ever smoke. And I show them my container that's got all these butts in it that I'm picking up. And it's just amazing. And I'll just keep doing it, except when it's pouring down rain. I don't get out there. So any questions?
I don't think so. Thank you very
Okay.
much, Sally, for all you do
And
for Auburn.
If you get on the computer and Google Butt Lady of Auburn, you'll read about me. And I've got a number of shirts that I wear, one every day. And I went to visit a cousin of mine after I picked up my millionth butt. I went to visit a cousin of mine in a care home over on Shell Ridge, and different ones working there said, "Oh, saw you on TV. Oh, I've seen you in the paper." And one guy that works there goes, "Yeah, my sister called me, told me I needed to watch TV about the Butt Lady of Auburn picking up her millionth butt." His sister lives in New York and knows about me. I've lost count of how many people have taken pictures of me and put me on their Facebook because I get people saying, "Oh, I saw you on Facebook." So anyway, I could go on and on.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Sally.
you.
Yes, Mike Holmes, resident of Auburn. I find it interesting that the staff and everybody on the dais is wearing a mask except the mayor. So how does he exempt himself from the sign that says if you come into this building, you're supposed to wear a mask? I'm not expecting an answer, but
You won't get one.
what's that?
No?
Okay, all right. Well, anyway, I want to talk a little bit about history. Today, 58 years ago, the President of the United States was assassinated. John Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. And as you know, I'm interested in Auburn history. And about 6 years ago, the Historic Design Review Commission approved the raising of the building at 229 Commercial Street, otherwise known as the what have I got here? Anyway. And nothing has been done since that time to rebuild the building. The part of the agreement was that the owner would rebuild that building called Lawyers Row. And that space has been vacant for a number of years now with no sign of it being rebuilt as was agreed initially. So I'm requesting that the Historic Design Review Commission be scheduled to meet on that and a number of other issues so that we can get some resolution to how we move forward with that particular issue.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, just provide a quick response.
Sure.
On that particular building, yes, it was demolished because, partly because of public, actually, really, truly, it was public safety issues. I was actually chair of the Historic Design Review Commission at that time. And the property was now owned by a young man, and he had a vision for doing some development there. But there was no quid pro quo that that development would occur on a particular time schedule. The owner actually was deployed, I believe, he serves in the U.S. Army, and I know that he was deployed maybe 6 months after he came before us to talk about his building, and he's had a couple of deployments since then. So I just wanted to state that for the purposes of the record, that I do remember that issue was a very emotional issue for all of us because of the historical significance of the building. There just was no way to save it because of the
Test 1, 2, 3.
and he was very careful and removed it, actually preserved some of the bricks because he does have a vision for that. And I do believe that at some point he will see out that vision, but there was not an agreement that he would have a time schedule or even that he would actually develop on that site. So just for the purposes of the record.
Well, that's not my understanding. I recognize he was a member of the National Guard. and
That's
had
what
been-
I remember, yes,
Yeah.
but he was deployed and. yeah,
But, you know, that's been a number of years now and nothing has happened. And
But
I
there wasn't
under-
I'm just saying that as the chair of that commission, I am sure that we did not require that he was going to develop on that site in a time certain. We talked about his plan and we were all really excited about it. But I know that we did not vote to require that he develop that site on a time specific, on any particular schedule.
And if I can weigh in, I was on the
Oh, that's
planning
right.
commission and I do recollect that
You're right.
very same thing is that he gave a very nice plan. I remember the thing that was important was that he was going to save the bricks.
Mhm.
I don't know if they're still there or if he took them somewhere.
He
But
stored
it
them.
was a real safety concern. And, but he did present a really nice plan. And I do agree that, and thank you for bringing it up, because I think it's something we should look
Well,
into.
and just to follow up, if I may, the iron doors front of the building were also supposed to be saved. And he had a vision for rebuilding it with the same bricks that had come down. And there were a lot of bricks inside the building as well,
Mhm.
that he presumably had saved in order to put back on that building, maybe not with quite the same design, but nevertheless.
Okay, I'm going to ask that we move on now. Thank you very much, Mr. Holmes, for your comments.
What's that?
I said, thank you very much for your comments. We're going to move on now.
Well, I'm just responding to.
Test 1, 2, 3, 4.
Comments. Is there anybody else who has items for public comment here? Yes, good evening, sir.
Greetings, City Council, Mayor Spoke, and city leadership. I'm Mike Lindberg, resident of Auburn, also chairperson of
Test,
the
1, 2.
Sustainable Advisory Committee. And I had a couple things.
Excuse me, Mike, are you here for the item that we have under council business?
No, this is a separate
Okay,
item. There's been a lot of discussion among the committee, and I know that it's an issue among the discussion with city leadership about deployment of solar power generating stations such as carports or other infrastructure for purposes of getting to a more net zero energy use on city facilities. There's also been the proposal of simply signing up for Pioneer Energy's Green 100 program, which is a 100% renewable resource for a slight upcharge. And I'm curious where we stand on either one of those initiatives. I know that they've been brought up several times tonight. I'm curious about progress or deliberation, or also what else our committee can do to push those initiatives forward. Thank you.
thank you very much. Is there anybody else who wants to speak during public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment and move on to our first council business item. This is a presentation by the Sustainable Advisory Committee.
So hi, everybody. While Amy's putting that up. So I'm Kathy Johnson. I'm the newest member of the Sustainability Advisory Committee. And I hold the seat of transportation, air and water pollution. So my background, just to give you a little bit of my background, is I'm a professional scientist, researcher, and I spent about 25 years investigating the fate and transport of pesticides in the environment and their effects on wildlife and ecological health, which can translate over to human health as well. And so one of the tasks that we had is to address glyphosate use in the city of Auburn. This is not the first time that I've stood before this, well, not this council, but several of you doing public comment. And so here I'm representing the Sustainability Advisory Committee, and we have some recommendations for you. And in front of you, you should also have a letter that basically is very similar to the outline of what this presentation is going to be. And we're going to just briefly go through some slides, and I'm going to have a conversation with you about glyphosate and discuss our recommendations and some of the rationale that we have with those recommendations. And then, of course, be available for comment. It's not working, Amy. Am I? Oh, okay. So just a little bit of background on glyphosate for those of you who don't know. It's a broad spectrum systemic herbicide. So that basically means it kills everything it touches. It gets in the plant, and it's not selective on what it takes out. So any plant. So if some of it gets to another plant, And that's one of the mistakes with glyphosate use is a lot of times that's why it's a problem for habitat because it can get into other plant species and then it can get into waterways and it can move around. It's the most commonly used herbicide. And the reason why it's the most commonly used herbicide, because it's probably one of the most effective herbicides. It's kind of a one and done, one shot, and it takes out everything. And in California, so California has a really good system of tracking pesticides. So the data here is from 2017, but it's probably very similar up to now that there's millions of pounds being used every year. EPA is kind of under the gun with the registration of glyphosate. As some of you may know or may not know, glyphosate is very controversial right now. There's a lot of problems. There's a lot of studies on its human health, how it goes into the gut biome, but I'll go into that in a little bit later. But EPA is now reviewing and reconsidering its registration. And in that led to that is there's several lawsuits regarding glyphosate. And these lawsuits are harm to people who have applied it and maybe their equipment failed, maybe they didn't use the proper, however it happened. There's several lawsuits, millions of dollars are being paid out to individuals for damages from glyphosate. And glyphosate is a known carcinogen. And so this is like one of the concerns that we have with glyphosate. So I'm not just sitting here telling you from my expertise in working with these pesticides, there's other background on this. In March of 2017, it was identified as a probable animal carcinogen or an animal carcinogen and a probable human carcinogen. That distinction doesn't mean much in EPA and statistics speaking, probable means most likely. And in that effect, it got added to the Prop 65 list, which is the right to know list. And you'll see the Prop 65 will be on consumer products. Am I hitting something? Like my hands are off of it. And so Prop 65 is just a right to know. If something, and so you'll see some of your supplements will have that warning on there. And then just recently, 2 weeks ago, EPA released a final biological evaluation on glyphosate that led to a likely to adversely affect determination. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more on the next slide. So so there's numerous studies that have said that have come to the conclusion that glyphosate is a risk and it's a risk to wildlife. I myself have done studies and I'm in the process of publishing a peer-reviewed article on the effects of glyphosate, the negative effects of glyphosate on an endangered butterfly. And so when people say it's an herbicide, it doesn't affect wildlife, that's not true. Just because it's just not really tested for that. But there's all kinds of effects that can happen from its mode of action when it gets into the human system along with the plant systems or the animal systems. And so I just really wanted to kind of touch briefly on this latest information regarding the biological evaluation. So this likely to adversely affect determination is a really a big deal. And this is what I do for a living. I'll be evaluating and going over this determination by EPA. And as a backup, just so you know, in 2008, EPA
Test 1, 2,
also
3,
made this
4.
determination, but they pulled it back because of all kinds of other political things that were happening. But this determination that likely to adversely affect is EPA saying that they know that glyphosate is problematic in the environment and that likely to adversely affect can lead to the extinction of some of the species out there. And that wasn't just for the four-legged species or the flying species, that's for all of them. And if you look at the report, which is huge, the likely to adversely affect was across the board. They also call habitat modification, which basically says that glyphosate destroys habitat. This is EPA saying this. This is not just me saying it to you or some scientist at a university or a grad student. This is the agency that registers this product. And then to take into consideration the hazards of the use of glyphosate is the risk to applicators. And this is something that you really need to take into consideration. Even though the applicators have training, there's things that can happen out there with their equipment, a tear in their PPE, all kinds of things can happen. And this is a pretty, the last point that I want to make and this is something I'm going to hit on, is the legal and reputational risks of using glyphosate. So in these lawsuits that have happened, and this is like, I'm not trying to be, over dramatic about it, but there have been over and over these lawsuits, and cities and towns and counties are paying workers that have been exposed to glyphosate and now have cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is known, glyphosate is known to cause. And so there's all this litigation and budgetary and fiscal responsibilities that have to be taken into consideration by continuing the use of glyphosate. So we're working in collaboration with Public Works. This isn't just something that the SAC has not just been working in a bubble on this. We've been talking with Public Works. They've been at the table. We've had meetings with them, and the information that's going to be in these next couple slides is information that has come from these conversations. So right now, currently, Public Works doesn't apply glyphosate a lot. It's not like they're just spraying it everywhere. It actually is quite limited when you look at the map. And we have some recommendations, and some of these recommendations are already things that are in place. But right now, we would like the city to make a clear statement on glyphosate use, where we stand as a city. Do we want to suspend its use, restrict its use? How do we want to discontinue its use? So make a decision on where we stand and be a solid statement on how we feel about glyphosate-based herbicides. We'd also like to have you take into consideration, and maybe this could be actionable today, but take into consideration some alternatives that we've discussed with Public Works. And we would like to do some experimental plots and come back and maybe have a conversation like this again in 6 months and let you know where we're at, what we're finding out, what's out there. This isn't just, hey, let's just cut this out and move to something else. We want this to be a thoughtful and efficient decision. And then the glyphosate restricted uses between May and July, that's pretty much what Public Works is doing already, because it's applied at a certain time when plants are emerging and they want to keep the weedy species down. And it's not sprayed in curbs and gutters. That's a recommendation. That's already pretty much being done. And then we'd like the city council again to approve the purchase of the alternative. And we have an alternative in mind, but we're looking into other ones. And this use, to comment on that use, to ask them, can you minimize that use? And so this is a question like for you, the city council, or maybe the city attorney, is do we have that ability to speak with these other entities about not spraying here? Because if we want to make Auburn a glyphosate-free zone, we might want to work with those other people. I don't know logistics of it, how far that can go. And then again, to reiterate, is we recommend clearly stated objectives, like if we're restricting or if we're not. And then to get into the communities. So communities aren't notified when there's going to be a spray. And so maybe start posting that. Maybe that can be in workshops, posting notifications on web pages. I don't know. I'm not big on sending out mailers. Most people don't look at your mail, and we're creating more waste in our landfills. Conduct public awareness workshops, outreach to communities, and then provide signage. Maybe if we're going to spray, put out a sign saying we're going to be spraying here within 48 hours of glyphosate. Go to this webpage if you don't want it sprayed. These are all just suggestions and recommendations that maybe we could do. And so in front of you, you have, well, I hope it's in front of you, but you should have the letter, which basically says everything that this slideshow. This slideshow is just basically to kind of get to get it rolling.
I just want to let the mayor and city council know that letter is your staff report.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Amy. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. She put in a staff report. Thanks, Amy. So these recommendations, if they're determined that they're not feasible, or the city council or public works, this isn't something that you guys want to do, it would be, we recommend that a statement be made where we'd like the city council to make a statement on how they feel about the glyphosate use. And if they want to take our recommendations, if they like our recommendations, if they want us to change some of the recommendations, they can be built upon. They can. So again, like I said, this is just a conversation to get the ball rolling on more conversations, because we would like thanks. We would like to reserve the right to come back. And so what one of the hopes is, and when we discussed coming to you with this presentation and this letter in the staff report, was that to come back in like 6 months. And hopefully in 6 months, maybe we'll have some experimental plots done. Maybe we'll have some more information, but just to keep this conversation going and to make sure that we're keeping this on the forefront. And also glyphosate right now it's under a lot of fire. There's reformulations going to be taking place for Roundup in 2025. It may not be in Roundup anymore, and it may not be in some of the other products that have, but we don't know what that reformulation can be. It can still look a little bit like glyphosate and act like glyphosate. They just chemically change the structure and re-register it. So by saying that, I don't want anybody to think just because there's in the news that Bayer, that used to be Bayer bought glyphosate and Roundup from Monsanto. I don't want there to be a thought that this may not something that we have to worry about. This may go away by itself, or it may become just another problem with just a different name. So I think it's very important that the city council take into consideration our recommendations, and the committee, we very much appreciate your time, and I appreciate you listening to me. And we are all available. The committee is available for more questions or comments. And if any of you would like to have a sit-down conversation and know a little bit more about glyphosate, I'd be more than happy to meet with any or all of you at your convenience.
Is that it?
Yes, that's it.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Clearly, you're very knowledgeable about glyphosate, if I pronounce that right. I'll go to my fellow council members here to see who wants to start. Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Kathy, thank you for coming. I know you came and spoke with us in 2019, and actually looking at our minutes, we actually directed staff, John, I realize you weren't here, but we had directed staff at that meeting to come back to council with alternatives. And so in our recollection, at least, and I know not everybody was on the council at the time, but we're not remembering actually getting any alternatives brought back. So I know this isn't a question for Kathy, and not to put John on the spot, but I think that we and the community are still owed that discussion. And I think today's some of the alternatives that were even discussed by the Sustainability Advisory Committee just reiterate the need to do that. And I would definitely encourage staff to go back and even listen to the meeting, because if I'm not mistaken, here on the dais, we had a few suggestions. I know I had talked about seeing if Public Works could purchase and implement to go on the side of a tractor to cut along the roadways. It was mentioned about pick a weed day, which I think is a great idea. But we had at least had some discussions that the council had brought forward. And so I don't know, and again, don't want to put Matt on the spot. Matt, I know you were there, but not the Public Works Director. But I would like to hear a response at some point brought back to us to discuss those alternatives.
And I would like, I would like to also be very clear is that we're working very closely with Public Works. And so a lot of the content that you see in the slides and that you see in that staff report came from meetings that we've had with Matt. And
Yeah.
Angela has had his input as well.
And I definitely appreciate that. I think as was even discussed, we need to make sure that we're abating our weeds. You mentioned the fire risk piece. Again, as staff know, nobody knows better than me and my neighbors about when the city doesn't cut down their weeds along the roadways, what can happen with fires. But I think that we need to ensure that we're allowing our public works crew, and I realize I'm going to comment, but it's informational and I'll be quick, to have every tool that's available. And so I really appreciate the committee's focus to not say, damn it, ban it, but rather, have a conversation with Public Works to make sure we're not making their job harder. In looking at the presentation from 2019, the cost benefit analysis was done, really only looked at the staffing increase it would take to use staff to use weed eaters versus the purchase of the chemical. But I really liked the recommendation that was made to look at what are the other liabilities and what are some of those other costs. And so I think as part of what I would hope today we would redirect staff to do would include looking at a true cost benefit analysis and make sure that we're truly identifying the extra work that it would take on Public Works. So I appreciate, Kathy, you returning back some of these items that we said we would do 3 years ago, but thank you to the committee for your work on it. And again, look forward to staff's return back. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Mara.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Spokane. Thank you. That was just an excellent presentation and very informative. Have you had some experience personally with Green Gobbler? Do you know if that's a viable alternative?
I have not had personal experience with Green Gobbler. That's one of the reasons why we were going to run the test plots, so we can have that. So when we come back to you, we can say, yeah, it worked really good, or it's not as good. Maybe we have to rethink how we do this, because I don't have the experience, and I don't believe that the city has the experience with it either.
Well, great. That's what I like about this presentation, is that you're working together and that you're looking for alternatives that are viable. I think also, I agree with Councilman Berlant in that we should look at all options, including non-mechanical goats. I see many jurisdictions where goats are within large cities, doing weed abatement. So I appreciate that, and thank you for the presentation. I just have a question for our attorney. My question is, within our city, we have a lot of private property, and we also have public entities. Can we, if it comes down to creating an ordinance to ban glyphosate, can we do that? Are we within the? Do we have an opportunity to ban it from having jurisdictions not use glyphosate and/or private properties?
So most of the jurisdictions that have addressed this issue are focusing on the city or the jurisdiction's use of it. Clearly within your purview to do that, and that was part of the discussion tonight. State law regulates pretty closely the use of this, and it likely preempts what the city does as to private actors on their own property.
Okay. And what about like parks? If we decide to have an ordinance, do they have to follow our ordinance?
Potentially. I will look into that question
I
for
don't
you.
mean to put you on
But
the
you're,
spot.
you're speaking to ARD parks within
Yeah,
city limits
yeah,
specifically.
yeah.
I'll follow up with you.
And
That's
the-
going to be a close call, and it'll depend on the
I'm-
Parks and
I
Rec law.
I was just asked that question by the committee, so
Yeah.
I wanted to pass it on.
And the railroad and PG&E. and-
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Right.
really well, the railroad is private, of course, but
you know, yes, but the special districts really is what I think the question is whether or not the city can enforce an ordinance that would be applicable on those properties that are managed by those entities.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo.
Yes, so thank you very much. I appreciate your coming to us today with this information. And I also appreciate your flexibility. You know, you're not just in here, damn it, ban it. I really appreciate that. You're open to looking at various ways and things that we can be, you know, work towards that sustainability, but also do it in a cost-effective manner. So I do appreciate that. We are a small city. One thing that I would really be interested in having is perhaps a report from our Public Works folks about their application of this particular pesticide. You know, just a little more detail about when and how often, and this discussion about that we don't go in the residential areas, but there's a no spray zones, or there's this list, and how does that work exactly? And just, you know, providing us with an overview of what our application is, how often it happens, and so forth. And then also some discussion of other methods that we utilize to for weed abatement purposes. So the other thing I really liked was, a pilot project. And it sounds like you're already kind of working with Public Works on that, where you have an area that you're applying this particular pesticide, but you're looking at others like green gobbler and others. I'd love to know what others are out there. I was trying to do a little bit of research from the Department of Pesticide Regulation, which I used to work with very closely when I did the Cal EPA stuff. And, but it'd be great to know really what's out there and to do those tests, you know, because maybe green gobbler isn't, you know, we don't know, but there might be others too that might be effective or what have you. So I'd really like to see that presentation to us from Public Works to talk about that. And then, and I am very interested in seeing what the results are for those test sites. The other thing is I'd love to see the committee look and do some research and see if there's any grants or any funds that's available to assist cities like ours that are trying to be a little more environmentally responsive. You know, the state is so flush with money these days, you know, that there might be things that are available that we don't know about. And I'd love to be able to take advantage of any potential funding. If there's any pilot projects that we could potentially participate in with the state. So I'd love to have your committee is perfectly poised to do those kinds of research. And I'd love to see you guys do that if you could, maybe even on the federal level, there might be something. But, you know, because obviously our funding sources are limited. So wanted to just mention that as well. But yeah, so I'd like to have that presentation and this is an ongoing conversation. And I'd love to get the answers also that the vice mayor put forward to our attorney too. It's important for us to understand what our overall capacity is with regards to regulating and so forth. The last thing I wanted to ask the committee is that, you know, putting together, you know, working to put together a presentation for our personal property owners, our homeowners and so forth, because I think that they also would be interested in, I know a lot of my neighbors are interested in utilizing something different. And so they're looking at, you know, proven and test worthy applications. And I know, again, part of that's going to come from our test projects because we're going to see what's happening on our own property and we can pass it along. But I'd love to see if there's something on the website that we can develop, you know, some kind of a presentation or a program or information, frequently asked questions or what have you, to provide that information for our property owners as well. So
Yeah, we're gonna, on our webpage that we're building, we're gonna have a, like a, what can I do section that's gonna have like how you can, and we can have lawn care. And I know that we're gonna be talking about native grasses. Like if you convert your lawn to a native grass, you probably won't get many weeds.
And the other thing I think would be great too, is if you had somewhere where people could share ideas, because maybe someone has come for, we're again, outside of the city's spraying, but people might have come up with recipes that have worked really well for them. And, you know, and so they would like to share that information and that would be great too. Or what do you do when you can't find vinegar? I know my mother was trying to find vinegar. I mean, you know, in gallon sizes to make a particular herbicide and couldn't find it. So I think that would be great too, to have that information available and to have that exchange of information. So from the private property owners. So, and look forward to hearing more about this. So thank you so very much for bringing this to us.
You're welcome.
Councilwoman Ardell Harris.
you. Thank you for the presentation. It was great. I always learn a lot from these presentations, and this is no exception. I don't think there's anyone on the council who would say they're really excited about using causing chemicals. So obviously we're trying, we would love to implement some of these things. The concern is cost effectiveness and making sure Public Works has the ability to use what they need to in order to accomplish their job. One of the things that my immediate thought was, I don't want to wait 6 months. So I would like to hear back from staff on the recommendations they had seemed very reasonable and not, let's just eliminate using this. So what would be the downside in just implementing them now and coming back at the next council meeting or a couple, whenever it is soon, with those changes? Also, maybe it would be a statement from city council that we agree on that when possible, we will use alternatives or eliminate this if it's cost effective to do so. So it's not necessarily we need to get rid of it, but it's we all are in agreement that we'd like to move away from it as soon as possible and try to figure out what those alternatives are. So that way we've made a statement that shows that we're moving in that direction, but isn't necessarily we have to stop by 2 months from now. So I feel like maybe there's like a happy medium, at least to kind of get us to start that transition away. If that's possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do have a couple of questions for you, Kathy.
Mhm.
Again, obviously, being that you deal with this in your day job, I presume you're highly educated on all this stuff. I read it in the staff report. I tried to find it this evening. I couldn't find it, but something to the effect of not wanting to flip the switch, right? And ban the use of this and implement the use of something different until we had time to do the test areas, until we had time to understand if what we were replacing it with was more dangerous
Mhm.
than the glyphosate. So it sounds like there must be some pretty nasty herbicides that are out there, might be used as alternatives by a public works department. Can you speak to any of those that you're aware of?
Yeah. So when in 2017, when everything was coming out about glyphosate on a national level, because I sit on national committees for pesticide use, we were nervous because banning something often leads to something else coming back. 2,4-D is the alternative. And we discussed this as a committee because if you ban glyphosate, most likely, especially agriculture, big operations will go to something, they'll go to whatever's available, and 2,4-D would be available to them. And that's a much worse herbicide. It gets into groundwater. It doesn't go away. It moves through the environment. And just to give you an idea, it's related to Agent Orange, to 2,4,5-T. And so that right there was a human experiment when that stuff was dumped. So we don't want, and 2,4-D isn't readily used. It's used for specific things that like pepperweed, that's very hard to control. But that was one thing that when we were talking about bans, and professionally, I don't like to say banning because people that knee-jerk reaction, we got to get to something because everybody is very relied upon the chemicals right now. They forget that maybe we could do some other things like the goats. And that was a concern. And I brought that question up when I spoke with Public Works. If we said you can't use glyphosate, what would you use? And we don't really know because the situation isn't there, and we don't want to ask for that situation to happen. We want to be proactive and make sure that we're covering all the bases and making sure that we're not opening up the door for another more lethal herbicide to come through and then be here in another year asking you to stop the use of 2,4-D. And there's like atrazine and propazine. There's other chemicals out there that could be used. But glyphosate is broad spectrum. And so you just jump over to another broad spectrum herbicide.
Great, thank you for that.
That's a perfect point because there was just an article I just pulled up from the Department of Pesticide Regulation that talked about warning organic farmers to stop using WOW, which is whack out weeds, which is an Ecomite Pro pesticide product, I guess. So I think that your point is very important in that if you do an all out ban that you don't know what you're going to get and it could be a lot worse, or research needs to be done because you have, like I said, there's articles here about just different pesticides that have come up in response to this issue specifically that really may be even worse, or they're marketing themselves as being, perfect and they're not because they haven't had the testing. So.
No. And, and the thing too, if the city was just randomly just spraying glyphosate like crazy, we might be having a different conversation. But Public Works is very thoughtful about how they apply. And if you look at the mapping of their application, it's very strategic. They're not just going out there spraying willy-nilly. So we have an opportunity in this city because we already have a very mindful Public Works with the use of herbicide, that we have the opportunity to look at alternatives instead of, jumping in the air saying, oh my gosh, we have to get rid of this, like other cities, because other cities have banned glyphosate, but these cities were using it, like Manhattan, New York, they were using it a lot more than what we were. So they did an all-out ban. And I don't know what has happened from the banning, if they jumped to something else. But by restricting its use or discontinuing glyphosate, it's not totally novel. This isn't a new thing. There's other cities that have done it, and under different circumstances.
So Kathy, in the staff report, I think you wrote most of that, or the committee wrote most of that. There's lots of suggestions, lots of maybe workshops, develop material for this or that, or posting things on websites. It sounds like you're already working on a website. Am I correct in my understanding that the SAC will be driving the workshops, driving the information, helping to develop the information, so that if the council decides to, adopt a ban or adopt a phase out program, that you guys would be there to help with all of that?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay, and I really do appreciate Public Works, Matt. Thank you for working so closely with the SAC on this stuff. I think that's a great partnership.
Good job, Matt.
All right, John?
For the benefit of the council, I can tell you, we've already had active discussions about all of this, and I think so many of the points being brought up. We as a municipality, we are regulated as far as how we spray. We have to have licensed applicators. The spectrum of what you spray, you need a spectrum of different products, because where you spray, how you spray, what you're spraying, all have different ramifications for it. You use different products in a riparian environment than you would in probably along some of the areas in the shaded fuel break area. Just different products, different applications, different things, because even some of grandma's homespun recipes, yep, they totally work, but they also killed all the beneficial insects that were in the area. So what I will tell you, we will bring back an overall program that talks about our application program, the logic behind what we use, where we use it. You talked about the best management practices. All of that goes into the overall program that you have to use, because whether you're along the roadside using some type of roadside spray or hand application, it depends. When you go in to kill the Himalayan blackberry in the riparian areas, there are some products that, the reason why you use glyphosate is because the one slide was right. It kills everything very effectively, and in the ag environment, it also doesn't kill certain insects that are beneficial. But we'll bring back the overall program, what we use, where we use it. You're right, the total ban of it doesn't work. There are many alternatives to good old-fashioned Roundup that we can use. I got a message that we have some ideas on some test areas that we can use. Actually, it might be beneficial to pull out a couple of different types of products that we might want to use. So we'll absolutely bring it back sometime after the first of the year. And we will continue to work with them. I will tell you that probably the most effective people to use would be whoever is in the Ag Commissioner's office. They are the ones who regulate all spraying within the county, and also work with the Master Gardeners program. Our fire department's already working with the Master Gardeners on various things, but the city putting on that workshop probably won't get the bang, but if you get all the master gardeners out there to put it as part of a multifaceted program, we can do that. So this is really good information, and we will return to the council with what we're doing.
John, is it possible for you to bring back maybe just the policy that we're already doing, so that way it can be
I don't
made,
think we have one.
well, no, I mean, making what we do into it, because I mean, we're already trying to do the right thing, but it's not anything that's been defined. And people ask me all the time, do we have a policy on this subject? And I say, no, we don't. But if we are already doing the right thing, it would be nice to say, yes, we do, and we're already doing the right thing. We don't necessarily have to make any big changes. We just have to write out what we're doing right now, which is trying to minimize the amount of use and trying to find alternatives if we can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, let's see what we're doing. My just as an educated guess, sometimes the policy is within the limits of whatever your license says that you can use that. That becomes the catch-all because as a in the maintenance department, sometimes that determines your limits and the extent of everything. But let's see what we have from what we're doing. I will share with you that I know that our public works superintendent, Matt, is really on this, very thoughtful about it. And in some ways, we'll shave this thing in to, if anything, some type of a policy which talks about the spectrum. You're right. The idea of completely banning something probably isn't the way to go. But there is a way for us to establish the most effective toolkit of the things that we are using, how we do it, because they're the idea, sometimes there are unintended consequences of completely taking something out of the toolkit. But let's bring it all back after the first year. And I really appreciate the work of the people on this.
Thank you, John.
I-
Vice
I-
Mayor Amara.
Oh.
Yeah, thank you. I just had one quick question. In bringing in, just talking about where it's used, is it correct or refresh my memory? I thought glyphosate was particularly harmful around water and storm drains. Is that correct?
Yeah, well,
Because you don't want it to get.
so there's something like 28 different formulations that contain glyphosate. And you have some that are for aquatic use, and then you have some that aren't. And so what you have is the labeled use, and on every container is a label, and the label is a legal document. You don't follow that label, you're breaking the law. So the one that Public Works uses is not, I don't think is aquatically registered. And so there's different formulations. So when we're saying glyphosate, we're talking about a whole spectrum of herbicides. That's just that's the active ingredient. And each formulation has all kinds of other, some of them have ionic substances in them to make them stick to plants. Some of them don't, but it should not be, and most labels it says to not use things around water and to not use it during within 48 hours of rain,
Okay.
of a forecast of rain. And just so you know, as from ecological health, they should not be around water because one of the likely to adverse affect species are the aquatic species.
Yeah.
So anything glyphosate based, you should never really put anything near the water because it moves in the water.
Okay. And I do appreciate what you said. We have to see where we are and where we want to go, and we have to try and achieve that is the best way we can. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and open up public comment and invite any members of the public up to speak on this item. All right, seeing nobody coming up.
Mayor Spokely, I do have one email that was received on this item.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
That's the one you shared with us, correct?
Yes,
Thank you.
I sent this public comment to the city council earlier, so they've reviewed it, and I will show it now. And a copy of that public comment is available in my record, or in my office.
Thank you very much, Amy. Appreciate that. All right, I will go ahead and close public comment. Thank you again, Kathy.
You're welcome. Thanks for the time.
For all your time you
Very
put
much.
into that. All right, we'll move on to our next item, which is item number 8. I think Jonathan, you're going to present to us. This is a request for a proposal for assistance with the preparation and implementation of a form-based code for the city's commercial core areas. Good evening, Jonathan.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, council members. Jonathan Wright, Economic and Planning Manager. This evening, I'm requesting that you allow me to submit a request for proposals for the preparation of a form-based code. If we look at the actual scope of work on there, it's a form-based code, but it's also the implementation of a new zoning ordinance and some very particular design work that'll allow us to capture more of a master planning effort with this, what money we have potentially. Okay, let's see if I can figure this out. Okay, so last September, City Council held a goal-setting meeting. There were some goals that were identified specifically that talked about economic development. One of them was to prepare or to figure out a strategy for infill and redevelopment of our existing buildable sites due to the fact that we don't have a lot of buildable land out there. The other one was to develop a strategy to increase housing opportunities. So taking that to heart, staff moved forward to identify some of the goals. One of them very specifically was the age of our zoning ordinance. It was adopted in 1973. It lacks specificity. There's no vision for the future. And, you know, one of the things when we're working with economic development, we're trying to create a brand and an image. And when I go to a developer and start talking to them about what we want to see and where, why I really have no document to support that. And I'm thinking most people will agree, we really don't have a whole lot of vision for the community that's currently adopted into our zoning ordinance. The other thing is that you run into a series of hurdles that go through this or involved in the process. So, you know, a lot of developers, they're looking now for that by right type of development where there's specific requirements that they have to meet. And if they meet those objective standards, they're able to move forward. And we're trying to create that, or that's one of the issues that were identified. The other thing is we recently updated a new housing and safety element. That's going to require some changes to the codes anyway. So we have a nexus for actually doing a lot of work to our codes. And also looking around pedestrian planning. You know, one of the things we're talking about walkability, we're talking about creating a vibrant downtown. And so those are all things that are currently non-existent from our current zoning ordinance. Okay. So what do we need to achieve these goals? Well, it would help to have a modern vision. You know, let's be able to have a message and a vision that we can communicate to developers, a process for mixed use developments, over the counter permitting, like I said, some of those by right things. You have prescriptive standard that the developer has to meet and then can walk in and actually receive a permit for that type of development. And it's specifically tailored to the type of development that the community needs, i.e. housing, i.e. some of the mixed use developments. Graphic design, you know, we would really like to see or be able to communicate to developers what potential infill sites look like. So working with stakeholders, figuring out what the highest and best use is for some of these sites, and being able to convey that through an image that we can then send. You know, this is what the community's bought off on. This is what we're looking for this site, and this is what we believe would be the best use. Prescriptive design review processes. So currently we have a design review process, and there's no real specificity. We do have for the historic area, something that was developed in 1998 and then later adopted, which are specific guidelines, but not actual anything specific for development standards. And we also want to be able to provide incentives. So I did find a video, unfortunately it's not that short, but it's fairly short, that goes into what exactly a form-based code is. And it says it better than I could probably tonight. So I'll let you watch that instead of listening to me.
Before I share that, I'm going to share the computer sound since I forgot to do that when I shared screen. So just one moment.
Just want to be able to provide incentives. So I did find a video. Unfortunately, it's not that short, but it's fairly short, that goes into what exactly
was the form-based code and what it looks like. In the early years, there was actually a long and vigorous debate, a noisy debate among the founders of the Form-Based Codes Institute, seeking to define and refine the practice together. What's most important? How's a code different from a vision or guidelines document? Here's the definition we eventually derived. A method of regulating development to achieve a specific urban form. Now, there's a lot there. What is the form-based code? It means these are the rules. These aren't in the early years, there was actually a long and vigorous debate, noisy debate among the founders of the Form-Based Codes Institute, seeking to define and refine the practice together. What's most important? How's a code different from a vision or guidelines document? Here's the definition we eventually derived. A method of
It's one of those tracks, you know.
three montages.
rules. These aren't in the early years, there was actually a long and vigorous debate, noisy debate.
It's not that important. There's some slides later on that, well, hopefully I'll be able to explain through.
Eventually derived. A method of form. We're not talking about just the individual building anymore. We're talking about how buildings go together. These aren't in the early years, there was actually a long and vigorous debate, noisy debate.
It's not that important. There's some slides later on that, well, hopefully I'll be able to explain through. Really deals with the use first. So when we get approached by Rite Aid, we're looking at where a Rite Aid building can be placed within our community. Where's that site look like? Does it meet those standards for setbacks and development? The form-based code actually looks at, we're creating a retail building for the community. Now, today, that building is a Rite Aid, but it's a building that could then be used in the future to be something else. Because there's designs out there for Rite Aids and for a lot of the chains or even standard box stores that really just, they're unique to their own type of use. And if you can't find a similar user for that space, it's difficult. And then you're talking about tear downs and you have vacant spaces. This actually focuses more on the way that the building works with the community and the way it looks more than it does on the use, although there are specific provisions in there for use. And that's where it gets into the ordinance portion, which will allow us to really look at those things that we want to have within our community and create standards or reduce those standards by creating objective standards they can meet, so that they're not going through use permit process and design review process and all those things that would be required. And even incorporating some of the environmental stuff up front. So all that is completely vetted and ready to go. Oh yeah, back, sorry. And there are definitely some communities in this area that are using it. Form-based codes tend to be for specific areas. They're especially good in downtowns and old town areas where you have that specific guideline or specific criteria for developments in those areas. And so what, that guy will not stop. Have I said I don't like hearing myself? It's just one of those things, it's kind of weird. It's like riding in the backseat of your car. You just don't, it doesn't feel right. Okay, so what does a form-based code look like? Well, this is just an example. And so over here, you have nodes where you can put specific plan policies together for certain districts. Instead of having a broad-based zoning code that paints everything with red, which is commercial, you can actually do different districts within that area that have specific plan policies that are for that area, for redevelopment sites, for existing development. And it takes that and incorporates design standards, which you can see right there, and the uses, and makes it very, very easy for a developer. In fact, a lot of developers, John and I actually talked to some recently, and they were excited that we were going to go through this process, because that's what developers are looking for. The other thing is the vision here. So this is the vision map. That's just an example, but it kind of shows you it's not just zoning. It is zoning, and it's a series of uses, street development projects. It creates a vision for the community. So what we're proposing is what we're calling the Central Commercial Core Area. It includes around 268 acres. It includes our downtown, Old Town, the fairground area and some of the areas adjacent to that, and the residential node that is right up between I-80 and the downtown. Now, so our code was developed in 1973. We've made very little effort to try to expand beyond the parameters other than what the state provides us. We basically just patch in whenever there's state requirements, and we just keep patching it. And then they give us new regulations, so we adopt whatever the standard are. There was in about 2008 to 2014, there was an effort to try to revise the code. From that effort, I believe we got some of these numbers. Those are actually, it was the city's attempt at putting together kind of a mixed use. It's actually more of a dual use. It said, well, you can do commercial here or you can do office, but it's not a traditional mixed use, which would provide for a spectrum of uses. But those things are definitely a starting place for those areas because those districts have already had those in there. So we look at those and develop them forward on how do we make them even more contemporary. All right, so where do we go from here? Well, if you approve me moving forward with this, I will publish it, send it out to every planning agency that I can find, and we'll solicit their responses. We will evaluate their availability. We'll evaluate, their experience in this type of code, and we'll also look at finance. And once we put those pieces together, I hope to be able to come back to you with a proposal that says, here's who's going to do this, or here's what we're trying to do, and here's how we're going to fund it. And we're putting those pieces together throughout this process. So I feel very positive that we're going to be able to put something together to move forward. From there, it's going to be up to the consultant, and we're going to work with the consultant to create an engagement process. We want this to be stakeholder driven. One of the things that I've heard from this council is we don't have enough. The feeling is that we're not engaging with the public enough. So one of the first things I think they should do is engage with the public in a stakeholder meeting. Now, talking about different districts, so obviously there's probably going to be a number of stakeholder meetings that staff will help facilitate through this process to gather input. They're also going to look at the existing conditions. What type of documents do we have out there? What does our current code provide? What does our general plan currently provide? And then they're going to go into the actual writing. Development of a form-based code, the regulations, illustrations, architectural standards required, environmental and general plan updates that will create this giant package. They will then draft the presentation, and one of the requirements is they're going to present it to the public. So we want to make sure that that is rolled out in a town hall style, open to the public. Let's get some boards out. Let's get them talking. Maybe we'll get staff involved in some of the different elements. And let's get the community involved again in viewing what we've come up with as a solution to the list of issues. Then lastly, of course, we're going to go through the Planning Commission, try to seek a recommendation for moving this forward to the City Council and bring it forward to you for review. And then after that, we don't want to drop the ball. We want to be able to train our staff on how to use it. So once we've created that and staff is ready to go, whether we have to create a new application or some other internal documents to get that thing rolled out, it'll be go time after that. About it. So this concludes my staff report.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I'm sure we all have questions. I'm going to take the liberty of starting here. Can you go back to the map of Auburn that you had up there a minute ago, showing the areas that you were focusing on?
Okay.
There you go.
Yep.
So we've talked about this before. I'm not sure you and I have had a direct conversation about it yet, but the county has already made it known to us that they're going to vacate the domes in a couple of years over off of Nevada Street there. So I would really like to see that black line go out over that area, because this is
Nevada
exactly
Street.
the type of planning exercise that I was hoping that we could get to do for that, eventual vacation. They're gonna leave everything out there. And It's right next to our multimodal site, so it's a great proximity for our transit-oriented type of development. Form-based code would be perfect for that area as well.
So we're talking about up here.
I can get with you and show you exactly where it is.
Okay.
It's Nevada Street, which I think is
Yeah.
the white line that goes up there.
Yep,
So it's-
yep. Yeah, I think it's this thing right here.
It's the
Yeah.
area mostly on, I'll call it on the east side of Nevada Street, but it also is it's on both sides of Nevada Street.
I would like
Yep.
it to go all the way up to Palm personally, but.
So one of the reasons that we created this polygon here was because it captures obviously our two central core commercial areas, and then also provides some additional flexibility because this is, we have very little developable lands, and there could be some synergy with the fairgrounds, or even if something happens to the fairgrounds in the future. I'm not saying it is, but then we've already planned for growth in that area. The only concern that I would have from a staff standpoint is we're asking the consultants to do a lot, and the availability for funding may not be equal to what we're already trying to task out there.
I
So-
would almost say, Mr. Mayor, that in my humble opinion, that having the domes incorporated into that zone would be even more important than the fairgrounds.
Okay.
Because, I mean, the fairgrounds is a beautiful piece of property, but I just don't see them going away anytime soon. But we absolutely know that the Placer County Board of Supervisors will be vacating that space. And there's a lot of land over there. So I would agree with our mayor on that. To me, that would be a higher priority for me, certainly.
So I'd like that considered, Jonathan, and I get, and appreciate the cost component here. The other comment I wanted to make, or maybe it's a question for you, is SACOG has gotten into the land use business, and they have lots of grant dollars that are flowing through to the 6 county jurisdictions for work like this. Have we been able to reach out to SACOG staff?
We are anticipating using SACOG dollars for this, and there's even the new pro-housing development incentives that are out there. And in talking to Greg Chu, who's our local rep, what we're doing right now, the specific standards are exactly what they're looking for. So
Perfect.
we will pursue all funding sources.
No, in that same mix, I'm going to be on the pro housing call next week.
Okay.
So let me ask that question, and specifically, I've kind of forced my way into the pro housing meeting with Placer County. So we will talk with, I believe her name is Shauna, from the county to see what we could do to either push this process over into it, or to look to do a similar process, because both of them would be very much alike from an overall design standpoint, because both of them would include some type of a visioning for the area, at least loosely. But let's use the pro housing, because one of the things we're looking to do is to use some SB2 funds that we did not expend in the housing element, that we will do for this. So our ability to use some LEAP, REAP, SB2, and see whatever we could beg out of SACOG. We'll talk to our rep on SACOG to see what they can do to help us on that.
We certainly can have some conversations down there. They're promising to help with this exact kind of stuff. So now's the time. About 10 years ago, when I was on Planning Commission, we had a consultant come in. John and I talked about this morning. We had a consultant come in that started to do form-based code work for a lot of this same area. I don't know where that data ended up, but it's here somewhere. So if you haven't found it, maybe I can go dig through some of my old files while I'm Planning Commission, but there was a consultant team that was helping us do form-based code right when it was kind of the new buzz thing, hot thing out there. So let's try to find that so we can maybe not have to recreate everything from scratch. And I noticed on a city list of jurisdictions utilizing form-based code is Winters.
We all noticed
Is
that.
there some, is there some?
The first city in the region to adopt a legitimate form-based code? Yes, they did. And this will be the perfect model in Auburn. It gives us basically a PD, a plan development overlay zone. It'll give us an updated zoning code. It'll make the city attorney happy with objective standards that are applied. And then finally, it'll give us a brand new environmental document. We can unquestionably get through this thing probably with some type of a mitigated negative declaration as far as our overall environmental review. But it's something that I'm sorry, Auburn is perfect for this. It is perfect. And we already have developers that we have driven around the town that are just saying, oh, yes, if we can get ahead through this process that's outlined, we will have people banging our door to work with local property owners to make these types of things happen, because it does the number one thing that the development is looking for. It creates predictability for somebody to be able to come in and do a project. So.
Great. Thank you. I'll go to my counterparts here. Rachel.
Thank you. So I really like the idea. I think it's great. When I think of areas that need help with 49 corridor more than I think of downtown, to be perfectly honest. Is there a possibility of doing a phased approach where we can at least say that that's on the list of things? I feel like we need a code. Don't we need code improvements for the entire city and not just portion of the city? And then the other question I have is, you're very worried about cost, but you're not saying anything about cost. So can you give us a ballpark of what you think this is going to be and what you think you might be able to get for grants? Because I don't have a clue whether it's $20 or $20 million.
So I've thought about that very same thing is, how do we roll it out and actually, use it in other parts of the city? So once we've actually developed a form-based code and we know it's working in districts where we have a lot of activity going on, and the planning staff is familiar with using it and we're doing things with it, we can then expand that into other areas. It's going to take probably another, planning process and additional funding cycle. But this would be a possibility. We're trying to see if this is really going to work, which, we have tests that show that it does work. The major focus of interest that we have lately seems to be surrounding the old town and downtown area, and that was part of the reason for that effort. The other thing is with the residential development and the housing element update, it was really identified that our old town, downtown areas really don't have don't allow for residential uses. They do it to some extent, but not to the extent where a lot of developers are looking for that type of use. So we're really trying to focus on that. Plus, livability, walkability, creating that downtown and old town vibe will then, spill out into other parts of the community. And we'll kind of update as we go. As far as finance, hopefully there's no consultants listening to this. Yeah, well,
Yeah, they're supposed to tell us.
right now we've looked at a funding pool of around 250,000.
What is available through state cause?
That is broken up between LEAP, REAP grants as well as SB2 at this point. That doesn't include bringing in any additional funding through SACOG at the moment, through pro housing or through any of those things. So that is not at this point. No. We're trying to stay away from that. We understand that next year's budget may be very focused on fire and mitigation and those things. So staff, like we do, is trying to minimize costs to the best of our ability. We're trying to put together a package that makes sense for the community and something that will get something done. And so that's our goal. I love the idea of massaging it and trying to figure out where the highest and best use is for this type of thing. But we have to be mindful of the cost. We're asking our consultants to dig into the general plan and do some modifications. We're asking them to create this environmental document, help staff get through the environmental stuff, create some very, first-class imagery of this community. So when we go to people, everybody goes, I have not seen that anywhere. That is really great what you guys have done. And putting together a code, which is going to involve a ton of time with stakeholders and with our design review folks that have been doing this for years to gather all that input so that we can make sure that when we're done, we have a document and a process that most people buy in on.
If we're looking at going, if there are a couple interesting places like the Dome or a couple of vacant places around town that we know we'd like to think through a little bit more, is it a possibility of doing these areas and doing a couple little islands of planning work, or should that happen in a separate process? Because I know that we really don't want to just let some of these areas like the Dome just happen. Oh, sorry. So it'd be nice if we could have that process too. I don't know if that's a separate process or if that's something we could incorporate in this, but it doesn't necessarily have to go, you know, it could be, we love to have islands here in Auburn. What if we had like a little planning, a couple little planning islands for areas we really want to work on?
Go ahead.
So, and this would be really easy for us to bring back to the council,
Okay.
is let us bring back a map of planning areas that are under consideration. The form-based code is probably the best vehicle for the core area that we're bringing up. But realize that the city has also worked with Placer County on 3 green zones that exist. And in the pro housing group discussion that we've had, which would be kind of the 5th planning zone, the 3 green zones, the form-based code zone, is a core housing zone that they consider kind of the Luther Road corridor. So let us bring back a map that
Okay.
shows you those and maybe the different ways that we can look to work on the planning of those. The domes is absolutely there. We submitted a Green Means Go application with SACOG last year in conjunction with the county. They said yes for the domes. So let's figure that out a little bit, some funding sources. So, but let us bring those back for an update to the council on some of these things. And also, by the way, we haven't forgot about Highway 49.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
I did.
Okay,
Oh,
go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. And I appreciate that. I'm glad to hear that you're going to bring back the, the maps and so forth, because the other thought I had was that we could have a proposal that included the dome area in and a proposal that included the dome area out, and have them bid on both just to see what the cost, was for both of those. So that's an alternative as well. One of the questions I had was, how does this impact the historic design review process? Since we're, the commercial core area is mostly within the Historic Design Review Commission's jurisdiction and so forth. And I see that, I love this concept. I love it. I absolutely support it 100%. But I just wonder, how does that figure into things? Because it says like in some instances, you wouldn't even need to have a use permit and so forth. So I just wanted to know how that.
So, go ahead.
To kind of give you an idea of what the code looks like, on the left part of the slide there, it shows you the multiple components of what the form-based code does. You take the vision document or the vision plan, and it's actually broken out categorically. And this in the upper left part of the key map, it has D-A. So that gives a zoning code designation for it. In the middle of it, it has what are storefront development standards. And that's where you bring in some components of the historic design review elements. We do have a historic design review standards that we have, and the ability to include those in that component of it so that you meet some of the historic design review aspects of it, and it's defined in there. It gives you some of the setbacks, and then there, as you peel back the layers on it, you get into some of the design standards, materials, those types of things. And the bottom is the real gold of the overall form-based code. It talks about the building placement. It covers height, which is always a big thing. A form-based code is typically going to allow variability and articulation. So yeah, the height restriction may be 40 feet, but there may be components 50 feet because you need to add an elevator or something in there, but it allows for articulation and a better architectural look. The principally permitted uses, that gets into the zoning. It allows for multi-use. It gives the principal use on the first floor types of things, the conditionally permitted. And then the last thing, one of the things that the core area lacks is the ability in the commercial zones for residential. But our commercial zones do allow for apartments. And the density for those is 100%. But one of the things that when somebody is looking to do development, they're going to look at, they want to know the dwelling units per acre. They want to know that. They don't have the time to do the math. But that's what it looks like as you go back for historic design review, that type of stuff. It allows for the documents to kind of sit behind there also.
Okay. I just want to make sure that is that's incorporated in there. So thank you.
Vice Mayor Morrow.
Thank you. Just really quickly, I'm really excited about this. I love the presentation, love the idea, and I hope we find a way to go forward and continue moving forward. And it looks like from the map that it does include Maidu area, the Maidu. It goes down Auburn Folsom, but does it go as far as the fire station, I guess? Because there's a lot of
Past
potential there.
PG&E property down there.
Yeah, it goes past the PG&E. It encompasses all the fairground property. I don't know exactly where Maidu is.
No, Auburn Folsom, all the way down to,
Yeah, to the fire station. No,
Yeah.
it does. Oh,
Yeah, to the edge of the fairground.
because
ownership.
that's an area that there's a lot of potential down there, a lot of houses, a lot of potential. So
Yep.
that would,
Yes.
so, I mean, I think that's something we could look at too, down the road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We need it
Councilmember
for the
Burnett?
whole
Thank you,
city.
Mr. Mayor. And I would note that on
I
the
don't wanna
map, it
get
looks like it
confused.
ends at Pacific Street.
Oh,
To give
okay.
you a little
Thank you.
geographic.
Thank you.
I just want to reiterate just a couple things were said. I completely agree with Councilwoman Riddell Harris, and maybe this isn't the opportunity, but the Highway 49 corridor within our city of Auburn definitely is the place that needs some love and care and some redevelopment, additional opportunities. So would love to see this type of program extended there when the time is right and when appropriate. I do appreciate your comment about the stakeholder engagement that will occur, not just with the business districts, but obviously there are residential areas that abut these, our business districts. So the residents' input is important as well. Curious though, if this concept, if you have discussed this with either a business district or even the chamber, and what their thoughts are on the concept.
Brought it up in conversation, but nothing formal have we proposed there. We've talked about, different types of design standards. There's been conversations about specific planning and that type of thing, but just in general conversation, no formal presentations. They seem to be positive about anything that will promote economic development. I think everybody can agree that our ordinance is difficult to use and in some cases hinders development. And I think that most of the individuals that are in those business districts would agree that anything that streamlines a process and makes it easier to get something done is going to be a benefit.
Okay,
But
but
I
I
have
appreciate that. And again, I
But
think
we'll
what you're
definitely
saying.
draw them in as stakeholders for sure.
Yeah.
As well as our utility providers, anybody that has any type of dog in the fight, so we can make sure that we're vetting things fully through this.
Okay, I just didn't know if in the front end, they had any direct concerns. I would hope, like you said, there's only benefit to the economic growth for their districts as well. I guess I'll just circle back to, I would like to have additional discussion or presentation on, I think every single person kind of brought up a different piece of the city. And so, whether it's the entire city, whether it's sections of the city, maybe this is just our test case to do the first round. It seems to me that maybe we could get a better rate if we did all of it at once, but I'll defer that to you. But I guess I would just add my voice to the, I think this area needs it, but I know that there are other pockets within our city. Again, for me, it has long been Highway 49, as we've talked about, even just being able to plant trees, let alone redevelopment. That's where our biggest, I don't even call them box stores, but our larger spaces that do retail, Staples, grocery outlet, and even Rite Aid, and you know, how long they are, a grocery outlet is locally owned, and I know they do very well, but how long Staples is in our community, and even how long Rite Aid is in our community, as CVS, a competitor of theirs, is talking about downsizing their business footprint. I think we need to really make sure that Highway 49 corridor doesn't become just an empty section of concrete. So appreciate the idea. I definitely support it. Look forward to what the outcome is, and anything that we did before some of us on this council were born is obviously a sign that some updates need to happen. So definitely appreciate that. And I do think that if work was done by the Planning Commission prior, you know, digging it up and making sure we're not completely reinventing the wheel makes a lot of sense as well. So thank you.
Yeah, and it should be noted when we're going through this process, once the RFP's been let and we actually have a consultant on board, if that consultant, if their proposal comes back less, then we do have some flexibility once we have them under contract to go back and actually do some other things. This is quite literally trying to see, throw it on the fire and see if it stinks and see what we can get out of it. And whether or not we're in the ballpark for this type of thing. I've done a lot of searches out there for recent code updates, and I don't have anything, you know, of course, with COVID and everything, things have changed. Everybody was focused on housing elements, and that seemed to really force a lot of the prices up for planning services. So I really don't know at this point what we're exactly going to get back. So we're trying to create a realistic configuration of something that will get the most benefit out of the dollars we do have available, and hopefully implement it there. But of course, if there is some, you know, substantial money left, then the conversation about flexibility and added alternatives can be brought in for sure.
You know, and I guess I would just say that in talking to some of our local entrepreneurs who have brought in businesses and even have expanded businesses, and I will say are thriving in our community, the biggest complaint that I have heard is the fact that the bar and or the finish line always seems to be moved by staff. And so by really streamlining this process, not just updating the code, but hopefully streamlining it to make it easier, will, I hope, not only attract more businesses, maybe allow current businesses the opportunity, the flexibility to expand, move into a mixed use, true mixed use, that they don't have that flexibility now. And so I think there's just lots of benefits. I just have one last question. I want to go back to, I had written this down and then you brought it up, but I still don't really understand the difference. The Green Means Go application that we submitted with, I believe, SACOG, remind me and the community, what did that application or that funding, what is it going to do compared to this effort here?
Basically the same thing. It becomes a planning exercise. In this case, you know, it's always best to kind of establish your geographic bounds of the area. The consultants are going to want it. In the Green Means Go, they wanted you to identify high traffic areas. The idea of what you could do, transportation corridors, commercial corridors, where you could look to do the maximum planning within a certain planning genre. And that is the idea of multimodal transportation and the like. The Domes is perfect simply because it's got rail, it's got bus, it's got everything right there. So the Green Means Go, the areas that we located were one is directly off of 80, one is up off of Belt Road, the other is the Fullweiler site. So those just naturally became bang. We'll put those in. The reason why we wouldn't have identified this site is that this site doesn't necessarily check the same boxes that a Green Means Go application would. This location hits into an enterprise zone that I didn't know that we had. Fell on me one night in one of our meetings. This one fits this type of planning genre. What we look at for Highway 49 and for the Green Means Go sites, probably the Luther corridor, which would be a little bit different animal, all would fall into different types of land use that SACOG is advocating. The Luther Road site represents a very pro-housing because they are areas that the county has identified for housing, that we have identified for potential housing. So just different pots of money that have different needs. So that's kind of why we're positioning ourselves. In this case, because our ability to add multifamily housing, especially into this zone by upgrading the overall commercial zoning, allows us to use the SB2 in the LEAP and REAP monies because it becomes an implementation element somewhat of what our housing element says. So we're kind of chasing the projects that we think that we can use the money that we have available. In this case, we got about 300 grand, a little bit less, for that we can use for this. But the other pots of money are things that we can go to the well a little bit with SACOG.
But Daniel, the Green Means Go program was specific to the last MTPSCS update. And it was to get to the 19% greenhouse gas reduction target that we got from the state. And the program until just recently has had zero funding. It was just part of, here's what we're going to work on in this next cycle to try to achieve the reduced trips on the roads, the people walking, people taking rail, people taking buses. And that site at Nevada Street and a couple others that John mentioned were just perfect for it. So we partnered with the county, put in a joint application. By the way, every one of the 28 jurisdictions in SACOG all put in applications for different things. Some were core, old commercial corridors, rehabilitation to try to densify and get more mixed use introduced into the areas. This is just the best opportunity we had here in the city.
No, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the explanation. I guess just to be simple on my question here, will the Green Means Go funding and project for the domes result in a form-based code result, just like what we're putting out for an RFP for the core?
Certainly could.
Yes, it'll produce some type of a vision plan. The form-based code typically is better for reuse. What will absolutely happen over on the Fulwiler site will be some type of a specific plan because it'll be new development, new infrastructure, sewer, water, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, within a different concept. The form-based code is very much a mixed use, generally a redevelopment, reuse type of tool because it's, green area development where you're just tearing down and putting in new, that's a different equation than going into downtown or even into Old Town, where there needs to be more creativity in how you're going to reuse some of the properties. So form-based, yes, probably not a form-based code that would go in over on the Fulwiler side. That would be some type of a plan development zone or some type of a specific plan type of use for new development.
Thank you again. I appreciate that. That clarifies it. Nice job. Appreciate it. Look forward to this.
So I'm going to go ahead and open it up to public comment. See if anybody in the audience wants to speak on this item. You mind coming up, sir?
You mean to say that we don't expect someone to want to reuse the domes as they are?
Be careful. I already had someone comment that we need to save that historical building.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening again. I just want to say I think this is absolutely fantastic. News to me. This is the kind of thing that we have been talking about for a long time in my industry, and my own experience with form-based codes and other jurisdictions has proven successful as far as planning efforts and architectural efforts go. So just as a citizen and an architect and land planner, I think this is fantastic development. Really do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to speak on this item? All right, hearing none, I'll bring it back to the council for a motion or
I'd like to
further
make a
discussion.
motion to authorize the economic and planning manager to submit the RFP and report back to the city council after proposals are received and evaluated.
I'll second.
All right, Amy, if you wouldn't mind calling roll.
Councilmember Berlant.
Aye.
Amara.
Yes.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Riddell Harris.
Aye.
And Mayor Stokely.
Yes. Jonathan, nice job. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd like to thank everybody for going gentle on me for my first staff report, and have a great Thanksgiving.
You did a great job. Like, you're like an old pro.
Easy.
All three of you, all three of your voices.
Yes.
All righty, John, we'll go ahead and move on to your city manager's report.
Just real quick on a quick COVID report. COVID cases since 2 weeks ago have gone down, are in half, with the 7-day positivity rate only at about 3.7% compared to almost 7%. The overall positivity rate is only 12.1 per 100,000, which is down from 19 from 2 weeks ago. Hospitalizations because of COVID throughout Placer County, 68, of which only 29 people are from Placer County. So again, kind of beating the pans on great healthcare in Placer County. They're coming from other places. The ICU cases are down to only 24 cases in the ICUs, only 7 of which are from Placer County. And if you want to even think about the benefits of the vaccinations, of 35 people in the hospital, only 5 are vaccinated people. So good things that way. Overall, we're going to get into the holiday period. I think there are more things about ready to hit Auburn than we've got the light parade. We're going to start our Shop Auburn live videos coming up Friday.
I want to do those too. So last year, and I plug me into that. That's fun.
Just many things going on Wednesday. We're going to start decorating City Hall a little bit. Our staff are taking on the front of City Hall a little bit this year. So look for that to happen in the morning for the council members. I'll invite you if you want to come. On the afternoon, we will be making pumpkin pies at Station 1. So everybody's invited. All you need to do is bring 2 9-inch pie plate pans, and that's all you need. And we will be doing that. But overall, gonna kind of start sliding into the holidays, and I think it'll be fun. This will be my first mostly non-COVID thing, but we've got everything from turkey runs and runs to feed the hungry to Santa runs. Our staff in finance that take on all the different events.
Tree lighting on
It's-
Saturday.
It- It's going to be one event after another. So just get past it and don't run anybody over.
Great. Thank you very much. We'll go to council member reports. Councilmember Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Fire Safe Council met on Friday, received an update from the county on a couple planning items that they have been undertaking. One is they recently, if you saw on the news, adopted their local hazard mitigation plan. That does somewhat affect us, but the other one that also includes the city of Auburn is their community wildfire protection plan that they continue to work on. So 2 plans that I know our fire chief has had some involvement in, and we got a good update from the county on that. And then I'll just reiterate from the Think Auburn First committee under the Chamber of Commerce. We are moving forward with a number of videos. We will make sure to extend invites and have some special guests, but look for the core team here to kick it off this Friday with what is traditionally known as Black Friday, but those will be encouraging people to shop local. Of course, there is Shop Saturday the day after, and then that obviously segues right into the Christmas tree lighting that's happening in town as well. And so if you haven't already, make sure to like the Think Auburn First Facebook page to keep on top of what we're doing. And I know Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo last year was one of our #1 purchasers of things that we would highlight. And so I just would throw that out to the rest of you to try to outbid her this year and buy via live Facebook more at others. So again, small business Saturday, Black Friday, a lot of opportunities for us to highlight our local businesses that do need it. There's still, many of them are still struggling. And I think I was trying to remember the last meeting. I think I mentioned this. Maybe you have an update. I missed the last meeting. But the regional homeless ad hoc group that the mayor and I represent the city on has continued their dialogue. There's an elected committee, and then there's one that the staff have been working on. And I just want to bring back to us, and I think we had some discussions here, but lots of focus and discussion about non-barrier sheltering. Also, all of our cities desire to enforce our no camping ordinances and what steps we need to do to be in compliance with the Boise ruling related to overnight camping. And excuse me, I should say overnight ability for our unhoused to have somewhere to sleep. And barrier sheltering is one of the biggest ones, meaning if you are drunk or on drugs, you cannot use the emergency shelter as it sits today. So lots of discussion about how do we build that structure. Some dialogue on the new Campus of Hope that's being proposed. I know for those of you who are on Meddlers the other day, we got a very good presentation, but I would definitely think that maybe it warrants a city council one because
I actually, I requested that.
perfect
So-
because it while the campus is proposed in what I think is a really good spot, it's in an industrial area outside of 3 major cities in the most urban part of our county. Off of Industrial Avenue in the South Placer area, there still is a role for the Auburn Shelter. And, you know, how we ensure that our residents that are unhoused are being taken care of is part of the dialogue. And so I definitely would encourage you to look into that. But if it's already been requested, the Campus of Hope, I know is an important part of the dialogue. The county, I'll end with this, I think, the mayor, you may have more on it. I think this approach has been really well done to make sure to get all of the city's feedback and input into it before they've really made it clear where they're going to sit as far as what they're going to fund, what help they're going to give either Campus of Hope or on their own initiative. And I know in talking to both you know, our city manager and I think even our police chief, city staff have also been very involved in that process. So while homeless transient issues have not been highlight of the last couple of years for us, as we've continued to do a good job to support those individuals, it is a major topic out of a regional plan. So look for more to come as the county, I think, finalizes their plan. And I say their plan, but it really is our plan as a county. So with that, Mr. Mayor, thanks for the update.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Mara.
Yes, thank you. I don't have too much other than a couple of things here. The mosquito vector group, which normally has about no participants and just the board, basically, had 50 people present because there was a request to institute a mask mandate, or excuse me, vaccine mandate. And after 3 hours and a lot of public exposure and hearing, it was decided that there would be no vaccine mandate at this time, but it was highly encouraged that people adhere to the health guidelines and protect everybody. Then Sustainability Committee met and they talked a lot about glyphosate and working very hard on the webpage and just really working very hard, that group. And finally, there is, I don't know if it was mentioned, December 2nd at a Moonraker, there is a little meet and greet to support the DeWitt Theater and keep that going. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Dowden Cavill.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of things to report. The Auburn Endurance Capital of the World Committee has settled on a sign to put outside of City Hall. So it looks like this. It'll be on blue. It'll be an all metal sign. And they're working with Public Works on the exact placement outside of City Hall, but we should expect to see this. So welcoming folks to the Endurance Capital of the World. So just a great opportunity to do that. Also, we are working with ARD to sponsor another of those water bottle filling stations. Of course, we've approved one at the overlook there at the Auburn State Recreation Area, the area managed by the Tevis folks. We approved that last year. So now we're looking at a second location at the bike park, actually. So very excited about that. And we'll continue to implement that particular program that was, of course, recommended to us by the 9-year-old resident. So great program. Also, just want to let you know with regards to Pioneer Energy, we had a meeting last week as well. If you don't know, El Dorado County and the unincorporated parts of El Dorado County and Placerville will actually go online with Pioneer January 1st, 2022. So a lot of our efforts right now have been to educate folks in unincorporated El Dorado County and Placerville on the benefits of Pioneer Community Energy. And we're also looking at other places to expand as well. So we are very much interested in doing that and expanding our membership. Also, we voted unanimously to notify all the member agencies, including the City of Auburn, for an amendment to the power designation in the Joint Powers Agreement. We're just looking to have a little bit more flexibility in like our budgetary process and things of that nature. So we will expect an amendment soon. So that's all that I have to announce today.
Great. Thank you very much,
How is
Councilwoman.
the sign? Is the current sign being taken out and that one's being put
No,
in?
the City of
No.
Auburn sign will remain. This is just an additional sign
Okay,
outside of City Hall. So it's just, we have the City Hall sign that will stay,
okay,
but then we'll also have a sign outside of City Hall that will,
okay.
this on it.
And then do we vote to approve that sign as a council or is it just the endurance?
The
Sure,
Endurance
sure.
Capital of the World Committee, we've been working with John on it. No, I didn't think that we needed to, I've been keeping the council apprised of this, but I didn't think that we needed to have a council vote. If you
Okay.
want to bring it to. the
Is it
council.
that size?
It's going to be the same size as the sign out front with the City Hall sign. So it's going to be,
So we're just gonna have two signs next to each other?
well, they're working with Public Works on exactly where it'll be placed, but it'll be placed in an area so that you can see it from 49 coming in. Huh?
Sorry, I was just referencing, we used to actually have two signs, one called this side of the entrance. the
Civic Center.
Center, and then one said the community center.
Yeah.
And I complained about that for a number of years because none of them actually said
City Hall.
So
So,
now Public Works team put in a
City Hall sign,
got rid
yeah.
of the
So this is,
community center.
yeah.
John, I had talked with you too about trying to find some kind of replacement for the police sign. Not that it isn't glamorous, chief, but we use that for information and trying to get some kind of electric sign for, directional and prevent type stuff. So I just want to make sure that we're kind of planning ahead and making sure we're not moving signs all over the place. If that's something that we end up doing, that we're just kind of thinking through
You-
how,
You want to pack this council room? We can talk about electric changeable signs out there.
and I'm fine with doing, I mean, do you really think that the glamorous trailer for the police department is, I'm just throwing that out there. We'll need to think about it, but for emergencies and other things, we haul out the sign and then we can't even use it or change the wording on it. There's a lot of issues around that and having something else in that intersection, which is not a great intersection to start out with. So just wanted to throw that out there that we need to make sure we're thinking it all through.
That's it.
Okay. Councilman Riddell Harris.
Yes, in regards to the ARD with the glyphosate comment before, I'm the representative to ARD, so I can talk to them and figure out who that contact would be for talking to them and figuring out at least how they're using it right now. So they are having their annual Santa's Toy Chest event on the 20th through 22nd, where they hide keys around, and if you find the right one, then you get all the fun goodies inside. So keep your eyes open for that one. We had our airport strategic planning meeting on Veterans Day. Thank you to all the veterans who attended that one. It was a great event. We had a lot of good feedback from the folks at the airport. I learned a lot from all of those folks out there about security issues and infrastructure and all the kind of fun things that we're going to have to think about how to plan for in the future. So that was great. And thanks to everyone who came to that. During this holiday season, we need to think about all of the great community groups that are gathering food for our homeless and for those who are in need. So I saw the Feed the Hungry of Auburn out at the Mandarin Festival handing out stuffed animals, and I've seen the food closet events around, so make sure you keep that in mind. John, I did have one more quick thing about the Pioneer. Since that came up, can you make sure that that gets on one of our agendas in the near future about getting that, at least starting to talk about that green energy program? I know that we got an estimate, I think back in like May, for how much that would cost for us to do, and it got incorporated into the budget, I think.
Yeah, we can do that. No, honestly, it's just, we just haven't gotten to it. It is in the budget. We just need to get to it.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. And that's it for me.
All right. Thank you very much. I do have a couple of quick updates. SACOG did have a board meeting last Thursday. We got outlined on the timelines for the MTP SCS update that we're starting now. So that'll be going on all throughout next year at SACOG. We also, on Friday, I attended the homeless task force elected officials. As Daniel mentioned, a lot of talk about, the low barrier and different types of shelters. Wet shelters is another term that's used for it. Both are needed. I mean, the one that we're operating right now in North Auburn, that you have to be clean to get in there. You have to be dry to get in there. But for us to implement the camping ordinances, like Daniel mentioned, we've got to have an option for people who are inebriated or on drugs to be able to go into these facilities. So much different type of operation as you might imagine. The acre of campus of Hope is trying to utilize some wet beds along with some of the other normal homeless shelter facilities with services built in and embedded. I get the sense that our neighboring jurisdictions are all starting to do this for that facility. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. I will say the county made it very clear at our meeting on Thursday that they have no preconceived notions of what they're going to do. So this process that they initiated, I think, was a good one to try to get the information out there. And I like how they're doing the technical side with staff and then the elected side with representatives from each of the cities. But you can see the sides developing as it relates to that facility. The last update I have was forgetting what I was going to mention. Oh, I wanted to mention Festival Lights Parade. It's coming up quick. It's only a couple weeks away. It's on December 4th. So mark your calendars. It's going to be really busy here in town. So yeah, get that on your calendar. That is all I have. I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.